I am currently in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and I have a lot of time on my hands, so I'm hoping to be able to do some videos while I'm here. The only issue is it's been a bit challenging to find a good place within this apartment to actually do videos. The lighting is atrocious. And there's a lot of echoing and that sort of thing. So we're gonna work with what we've got for now, and that's it, okay? Basically today, what I wanted to do is talk about how to structure a really good lesson for your students. And this is a structure that sort of works for no matter what your age range is, even the level. Of course, you have to consider all of these factors, but this works most of the time depending on what kind of students you're working with, okay? Now the first thing, of course, this is the most important part, you have to assess your students' needs. I've talked about this in previous videos before, but doing some kind of evaluation at the beginning of working with a student is really important, because that's going to tell you their goals and exactly what it is that they like to do in order to integrate the skills. But once you figure that out, then you can go forward. Now, depending on their level, they may need grammar work, they need more vocabulary, maybe they need some kind of English specific to their industry or whatever it is that they're doing. Now, whatever it is that you decide to do for the lesson, you're going to want to state this to the student, okay? So let's say that you want to teach them the difference between the past simple and the present perfect, right? You might state to them in the very beginning of the lesson, today we're going to learn about the difference between the past simple and the present perfect and how to use this appropriately in a conversation, for example. Now, depending on whatever the material is, in this case, let's go ahead with this present perfect past simple thing, okay? You might present them with lots of examples, right? So an example that I often give to my students is, what's the difference between saying, I went to Spain last summer and I have been to Spain? Okay, what is the difference between these two tenses, and kind of figure out where they're at with these two skills before you can move forward. That cuts out a lot of the busy work, a lot of the extra stuff that maybe you don't actually need to address with that student, because maybe they have a high level of English and you just don't need to address the same issues with them that you have to address with maybe a more beginner student. Now, if you're going to do some sort of vocabulary-based lesson, a great way to start is with a warm-up. This would be maybe by eliciting some information from the student, eliciting vocabulary words. So let's say that you want to do an animals lesson plan, okay? You might ask them, okay, let's start with 10 words for animals from your home country. Okay, and then that student will give you what they have, and you'll be able to figure out where their vocabulary is in that particular topic. Now, of course, it's always helpful to have some sort of materials ready and prepared. So if you're doing a vocabulary-based lesson, pictures, props, maybe even charades or acting out some of the words, that's really useful. If it's a grammar-based lesson, then of course you can do worksheets, any kind of written activity so that they can actually see the grammar, see it used, see it written, and they can start integrating it that way. Either way, whatever activity it is that you choose to do to actually integrate the vocabulary or integrate the grammar for the student, you want it to be something that's engaging and something that gives the student the majority of the talk time. Okay, your actual instruction should be relatively short in comparison to the amount of time that the student is actually speaking during the lesson. Now, ideally, you would use all 4 skills in every single lesson, okay? Now, 4 skills, of course: listening, reading, speaking, and writing. Listening and reading skills being your receptive skills, speaking and writing being your productive skills. Now, for the most part, students usually develop the reading and the listening, the receptive skills quicker than they do the productive skills. There are some exceptions to this, okay, I've seen that in my career, but it's pretty rare, right? The majority of students develop the receptive skills first. So that means that for the most part, your lesson needs to be focused on developing the productive skills. This can be through giving the student a lot of talk time. Of course, that's number one, right? Most of the time the students are going to need to practice their conversational skills, but also writing activities, right? I emphasize this in another video related to working with shy students. You really want students to do writing. A lot of students don't like writing, it's not fun for them, but it really helps students integrate new vocabulary, new grammatical concepts. It's just very, very important that students develop the writing skills. And ultimately, whatever writing skills get developed will influence their other productive skill, the speaking skill. Now, related to that, something else that you want is to really encourage students to ask questions. Encourage students to ask questions during the instruction part of the lesson, but you also want to encourage students to write questions and integrate those questions through conversation. I talked about this again in the same video about shy students, but if you have students write questions and then answer their own questions, this is a really good way to get the student to practice the skills that you learned during the lesson. What you want to avoid as a teacher, you want to avoid pelting students with questions, right? Sometimes, especially if you have a student that's a bit shy or they don't really feel very confident with their English skills, you're going to find that you're the one constantly asking questions, and that's just not the way that a natural conversation goes. Like most conversations, there's a give and a take, people are constantly sharing back and forth, right? So if you have students ask you questions, that's just fostering the natural flow of a real conversation so that when they take the skills that they've learned in their lesson with you and apply it to a real life situation, it's going to feel much more natural to them. Now, providing feedback and correcting mistakes, this is another really important thing that you should be doing during your lessons. It depends on the preference of the student, okay? Some students really like you to correct them in real time, so they make the mistake, boom, you nail it. But I don't know, a lot of students, even if they say that they like that, I find that it kind of makes students a bit uncomfortable sometimes. So something I like to do, and I do this with several of my students currently, I like to keep a shared Google Doc where you can write down the mistakes that they make and then take the time to review those mistakes at the end of the lesson time. Maybe reserve 5 minutes or so, depending on how many mistakes they made throughout the lesson time, to review those mistakes, maybe even give more examples if necessary. But that way, they also have a record of the mistakes that they made throughout the lesson, and they can review that in their own time. Now, giving homework. Okay, this is optional in my opinion, okay? Now, I should say that the majority of my students are adults. They're mostly working professionals. A lot of them have families, children, and so on. They don't have a lot of time to do homework. So whatever homework you choose to give to your students, ideally it would be really practical and something that doesn't take longer than 15 to 20 minutes. So usually if it's a video that I send my students, I send them videos that are really no longer than 5 or 10 minutes, maximum 10 minutes. If it's any kind of grammatical homework, something that takes, 10, 15 minutes. I wouldn't give them anything longer than 20 minutes. It's really unnecessary. I always tell my students a little bit often, okay? That just means that the student should have access and contact with the English language every day in some capacity, okay? Whether that's 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, watching a short video, reading an article, something like that. But they should be having contact with the language on a regular basis. You can only really cover so much in a 1 hour lesson or 2 hours a week. I have some students that work with me multiple days per week, which is great, okay? But ultimately, it really depends on how much they're having contact with the language outside of our lesson. They're not going to always be able to work with me, right? So it's important that they're able to do this on their own and develop those skills and develop the discipline to continue learning the language even if we're not working together. I hope that this video was very helpful for you. I also hope to be back doing many more videos. I just have to get the lighting figured out. Also, they've been doing construction outside. It's been mad loud. So, I'm kind of working with some obstacles here. But all that to say, thank you so much for being here and thank you for watching. I hope to see you soon. Bye.